Clay Travis, Buck Sexton Show, joined now by Miranda Devine of the New York Post. Miranda, I've been attacked a lot lately for my awful haircut. Before we get into the Washington Post collapsing and you deserving 18 consecutive Pulitzers for your Hunter Biden stories, have you ever had a haircut that was so bad you left and you were like, I don't even want to go out in public for some time? Is there a worst haircut Miranda Devine story? Do you have one?
Yes, and I've only had one terrible haircut, and it was the one before my wedding.
Oh, no, this happened to me too. What happened? So tell me about this story. You're in Australia. You're about to get married. What happened? What occurred?
Look, the funny thing was that my husband also got a terrible haircut that day. So when we saw each other, we just laughed. I just decided I wanted to get it a little bit shorter and do a little bit of a Jackie O look, and it was just didn't work.
It was not a Jackie O look. My wife told me, I swear this is true. We got married almost 20 years ago today. August of 2004. I was in Michigan. I go to the barber. She says, I don't know about this. Day before the wedding, she sent her mom with me. This is actually very funny. She sent her mom with me as sort of a security guard to make sure that I didn't get an awful haircut. So whatever you do, no bowl cuts, nothing resembling a bowl cut. And I left, and if you look at our wedding photos, they gave me a bowl cut. And she was mad at her mom. She was mad at me. It's much worse than this haircut, but it was a really bad. My life is basically just a series of bad haircuts because I only pay like $20 for every haircut I get. And I keep thinking, oh, this will turn out fine. But anyway, Jesse Kelly was just on ridiculing my haircut. And I have to say, sometimes you get a video of yourself from angles. It's not like me just staring into the camera like I usually do on television. I'm like, I can't believe I go out in public looking like this. So anyway, that's what we're dealing with right now. Hunter Biden went out in public a lot in ways that I wouldn't have anticipated, in an easy transition here. Let's start here. Were you surprised that the Delaware jury convicted him? Do you think his defense team was surprised as well that conviction happened?
Yeah, look, I think they were incredibly surprised. I think that I don't know why, but I think they thought they had it in the bag. I thought it was like 60-40, 40% guilty, 60% hung jury. When you sit through the evidence, it was absolutely slam dunk. And Abby Lowell really didn't seem to know what was going on with a lot of the witnesses. And the witnesses were even Naomi Biden, who was one of the few witnesses that Hunter called, or Hunter's lawyers called. She was sympathetic for the other side. And the jurors afterwards said they felt very sorry for her, and they said that no father should put his daughter through something like that. So I think that backfired on the jury. And I guess the reason I was slightly surprised was because I've just come to this conclusion that, the Bidens have sort of rigged everything in Delaware. But clearly those people were not impressed by Jill Biden coming in every day and sort of projecting the power and intimidation of the presidency onto the courtroom, and all their other entourage doing the same thing. It obviously just didn't work. And the prosecutors said in their summing up, sort of gesturing over to where Jill Biden was sitting with the rest of the family and their entourage, and said, that is not evidence. You may notice or recognize some of these people from the news, but just put that aside. It has nothing to do with your deliberations.
We're talking with Miranda Devine. I was talking earlier in the show, Miranda, that I believe over time the truth wins. And I don't just believe that in the marketplace of ideas. I also believe it in the marketplace of commerce. And you have got a lot of really good and brave bosses at the New York Post. And the New York Post has been rewarded. The company, the newspaper, has done fabulously well over the past several years, bringing in lots of money, very successful business in ways that historically hasn't been the truth. I think that's connected in many ways to people having, myself included, a stronger opinion of the New York Post brand based on the bravery of the reporting surrounding the Hunter Biden laptop. The opposite, I think, has occurred at the Washington Post. The Washington Post lost about half of its audience. Reports are that it's going to lose $77 million this year. And as a result, Jeff Bezos, I think, kind of looked up and said, oh, my goodness, even I'm super rich. I don't want to be running a charity project. Brought in a host of new leadership that's designed to get the company back to profitability. And the Post employees, the Washington Post employees, that is, have staged an absolute rebellion and they forced one editor that was coming in to say, "Hey, you know what? Screw this. I'm going to stay in English." Important our listeners to know about what's going on at the Washington Post. You wrote a great column about it. It's post Lay and Buck, but kind of lay it out for people who might not have been paying attention.
Well, I mean, it's really an insurrection by the newsroom, as you say, rebellion, but they love to use the word insurrection against, ultra-matter.
That's perfect. Yes.
Conservatives. But I think, as you said, the sort of chickens are coming home to roost with the Washington Post. They were, front and center on Russia collusion, on the January 6th, all the lies that they told. They traduced our reporting, called it sketchy over the laptop, refused to publish anything, covered up for Joe Biden. That's all they do. Every single hoax that comes along, whether it's suckers and losers or, what was the latest one they've just debunked on Donald Trump? I'm losing track. But so many of these lies, they're quite happy to promulgate. And what's happened is, I think, they got sky-high readership during the Trump era because it was just scandal after scandal, and people felt worried and that they had to keep abreast of the news. And the Washington Post had this great brand and it was trustworthy and had credibility. But then when people started realizing slowly but surely that, the laptop is real, this hoax, the Russia hoax is a lie, and all the other things about Donald Trump just weren't true, and also realized that the sort of sainthood that the Washington Post had conferred on Joe Biden was really not deserved, and that he's a pretty bad man and has been a very terrible president. And so I think their eyes woken up and they realized, oh my gosh, I've been lied to by the Washington Post, so I'm going to cancel my subscription. I'm going to ignore it. It's lost its credibility. And the people in the newsroom don't understand that. They're the reason it happened, because I think the inmates took over the asylum. And they're outraged that the guy who's paying the bills wants to change things. And I just think that is, I've always worked for someone else. And if you want to be the boss, then you have to put your own money on the line. And, that these people are just so arrogant, and they think that they are the curators of everything that is good and ethical in journalism, and they are the opposite.
I think that's really well said. And ultimately, the profit motive is sooner or later, if the rich guy gets tired of losing money. That's going to be the case no matter where it is, rich guy or gal, whoever's in charge, because I think Steve Jobs' daughter has several different left-wing publications. And what does it say that the Post, to me this was so fascinating, when the Post leader comes out and says, nobody's reading your articles, our overall audience is down 50%, and basically we're on pace to lose in the neighborhood of $100 million. If I hear that, Miranda, as an employee, my reaction is, man, if I like my job, I better go bust my ass and work harder. That is destructive to any business in the world, whether you're selling cars or selling paper or selling newspapers and subscriptions. Their reaction at the Washington Post was, why do we have white men who are coming in to run the newspaper? We need to have more diversity. Like, that just, and to me, is indicative of how, if you let this woke culture into your business, and it doesn't matter what the business is, ultimately becomes destructive from the inside.
Absolutely. Go work, get broke, or whatever it is. Yeah, 100%. And I think also there's something maybe more sinister at foot. There is that sort of DEI patina as well, which is part of the problem with all these newsrooms. But also the Washington Post has a special place in DC as sort of an agent of the deep state. Their sources are deep state people, their friends, their cocktail parties. It's people like Adam Schiff, but it's also CIA, FBI operatives, And I think that they don't want the scrutiny that will come if you actually have an editor like this CEO who's been brought in, the editor who wanted to bring in. If you look at their record in the UK and even here, they are known for kind of objective and without fear or favour journalism, investigative journalism that absolutely crucifies both sides of politics.
Yep.
Whatever, if they're corrupt, they will call it out and they will do the stories. They won't pull their punches. The Washington Post has a history of pulling punches for their friends. And so regardless of their Watergate, background, I wonder if that was a Democrat and not Nixon, if they would have been as aggressive. But certainly these days, since the Trump era, they're pulling their punches on their friends. And so maybe they're also frightened of having kind of rigorous editorship in there that's demanding that they actually do the stories and check out if, their FBI source tells them something like about the Steele dossier. Well, you have to go and check that out and see if it's real or not.
Really good points. And they bring to mind two things here to close out with you, Miranda. One, if the Washington Post, for example, was just failing as a news organization to get everything right, wouldn't there be stories, as I was talking about earlier on the show, that were extremely pro-Trump that they screwed up, that later would come out, as you point out, if you only have errors that make Trump look worse, that's pretty strongly indicative of a bias. And then the second part of this, you mentioned Nixon and Watergate, obviously Woodward and Bernstein, the work they did there. They went after a Republican president. But even if you look 25 years later, the legacy of the Post was they went after Bill Clinton pretty aggressively on the Monica Lewinsky case. They covered. I was in college at the time in D.C. Every day I'd go read the newspaper. They were breaking new stories on it. If Joe Biden, I really believe this, had a similar style, well, we know he's much worse in terms of scandals than what happened with Bill Clinton, and they just pretend it doesn't exist, right? The legacy of Watergate was we go after people in power. That was what they did to Bill Clinton. Then when they went to a subscription business, it turned into, this is my thesis, we can't possibly upset the people who pay for our newspaper. Therefore, we're just going to propagandize and attack the right.
That is really interesting. Yeah, I have theories about subscriptions too, which I have no evidence for, but I do think the subscription model does skew you. And when you are in Washington, D.C., and your subscribers are going to be government bureaucracies, that'll be a big chunk of who is funding you. I think you're going to be, and in a city where 99% of people vote Democrat, and also with the paper that, fine, it leans liberal. It's never endorsed a Republican candidate in its entire history. Fine. But as you say, they did hold Clinton to account. So you would expect, it's fine. Go hard on Trump, and maybe you made some mistakes. I think they're unforgivable. But you are absolutely spot on. The fact that they have ignored the biggest corruption scandal since Watergate, which is about Joe Biden. I don't think because they particularly love Joe Biden, but I think because they wanted Biden to beat Trump because they really believe, like a lot of their deep state sources, that Trump is an existential threat. But he's only an existential threat to the deep state, to their kind of unelected missions that they promulgate overseas with regime change and new wars and so on. You see what's happened under Biden when they've had unrestricted power. And that's why Trump is an existential threat, not to the country, not to the world, the opposite, to them.
No doubt. Miranda Devine, she deserves 18 straight Pulitzers. I just wish she'd had a better haircut on her wedding day. Miranda. Yeah, I needed one for sure. Thank you for hanging with us, and we'll talk to you again soon.
Thanks a lot.